understand better as we conjugate a few verbs.
Here's the first one. Let's conjugate the verb cantar, which means to sing.
The highlighted letters are the verb endings. When you add a verb ending, drop the AR at the end of the verb, but keep the stem of the verb. In the case of cantar, C-A-N-T is the stem, and AR is the ending that gets dropped.
The verb ending that goes along with yo is o. I sing is yo canto. The ending that goes with tu is as. You sing is tú cantas.
Usted, the formal version of the pronoun you, works like a third-person singular pronoun using the verb ending a. In this case, you sing would be usted canta. The third-person singular he sings or she sings is él canta or ella canta. The pronoun nosotros and its feminine counterpart nosotras uses the ending amos. We sing is nosotros cantamos or nosotras cantamos.
Ustedes, the plural you, uses the ending an. Ustedes cantan means you all sing. And finally, the third-person plural pronoun ellos and ellas use the an ending as well. They sing is ellos cantan or ellas cantan.
We're using the pronouns to show you the verb conjugations because it's easy and convenient. Keep in mind that the pronouns stand for nouns of a particular number and often a particular gender. Saying George and Henry sing is the same as saying they sing. So you'd use the same verb form you'd use with ellos. You'd say George and Henry cantan. Now, let's practice with the verb cantar in a few sentences.
I sing in the shower.
Yo canto en la ducha.
They sing in the rain.
Ellos cantan en la lluvia.
You sing in class?
¿Usted canta en la clase?
So let's go over the conjugation of cantar one more time.
Yo canto. Tú cantas. Usted, él o ella canta. Nosotros o nosotras cantamos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas cantan. The endings are o, as, a, amos, and an.
Cool. Now let's go over another AR verb, escuchar, which means to hear or to listen to. Here's the conjugation of escuchar.
Yo escucho. Tú escuchas. Usted, él o ella escucha. Nosotros o nosotras escuchamos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas escuchan.
Escucho el tren.
Escuchan el teléfono.
Remember, the verb form that matches the formal pronoun usted will always be the same as the third-person singular verb form, the verb form that goes with él or ella.
Likewise, the verb form that matches the plural ustedes is always the same as the third-person plural verb form, the one that goes with ellos or ellas. So you'd say ellos escuchan to mean they hear, and you'd say ustedes escuchan to mean you all hear. We used an AR verb as an example, but this is true for ER and IR verbs as well. You'll learn to conjugate those verbs in a moment.
One more time. Let's go over the verb endings that are used with the AR verbs.
O, as, a, amos, an.
Section B, ER verbs in the present tense.
Here's the vocabulary for this section.
An edificio is a building.
Ardillas are squirrels. And pantalones are pants.
Now let's take a look at the next category of verbs, the ones that end in ER. If you understand how to conjugate the AR verbs, these will be a piece of cake. They work almost exactly the same way. We'll show you the endings for ER verbs, then we'll give you some examples. Notice the similarities between the way the ER and the AR verbs work.
The ER verb endings are o, s, a, emos, n. Now take another look at the endings of the AR verbs. They are o, as, a, amos, an. The only difference between the two is the a and the e. Other than that, the conjugation pattern is the same for both types of verbs.
Now let's look at an ER verb. Comer means to eat. The stem of the verb is com, and ER is the part we drop when we conjugate the verb. Yo como, tú comes, usted, él o ella come, nosotros o nosotras comemos, ustedes, ellos o ellas comen.
We eat squirrels. Comemos ardillas.
He eats buildings. Él come edificios. They eat pants. Comen pantalones.
Let's conjugate one more ER verb. The verb beber means to drink. It follows the regular conjugation pattern of an ER verb, so just like in the previous examples, we will drop the ER at the end and add the appropriate present tense ending.
Yo bebo. Tú bebes. Usted. Él o ella bebe. Nosotros o nosotras bebemos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas beben.
So once again, let's go over the endings for ER verbs.
O, es, hemos, en. O, es, hemos, en.
Section C. IR verbs in the present tense.
Now on to the final category, the IR verbs. Again, the endings for IR verbs are almost identical to the endings for ER verbs, but not exactly, so pay close attention. First, let's go over the new vocabulary you'll need to know for this section.
Lago means lake.
Grande means big.
And granero means barn.
Here are the endings of the IR verbs. O, es, hemos, en. Notice that most of the endings are just like the endings of the ER verbs, with the exception of the nosotros ending, which is the only form that uses an I.
Now let's go through the conjugation of the verb vivir, which means to live.
Yo vivo, tú vives, usted, él o ella vive, nosotros o nosotras vivimos, ustedes, ellos o ellas viven.
I live in a big city.
Vivo en una ciudad grande.
We live in a lake.
Vivimos en un lago.
They live in a barn.
Viven en un granero. Meh, meh.
Here's another example of an IR verb, grunir, which means to grumble. Remember the N with the tilde over it is pronounced like nie. Let's start with the conjugation of gruñir.
Yo gruño, tú gruñes, usted, él o ella gruñe, nosotros o nosotras gruñimos, ustedes, ellos o ellas gruñen.
Spanish is used in,
You grumble.
Usted gruñe.
We grumble.
Gruñimos.
I don't grumble. No gruño.
Notice that the first person singular or yo form uses the O ending for AR, ER, and IR verbs.
Yo uses O.
It doesn't matter what kind of verb you're talking about. Yo uses O.
Section D. The irregular verbs tener and querer.
Before we leave the verbs, let's go over an irregular verb that you'll use frequently. The verb that means to have in Spanish is tener. But first, you know what's coming.
The word jugadores means players. Football sounds like football, and it really is. But to Spanish speakers, football or football is what Americans call soccer. Jugadores de football is soccer players.
And abuelo means grandfather.
Tener is an ER verb, but it's an irregular verb, so it doesn't exactly follow the predictable pattern of keeping the stem, dropping the ER, and adding the appropriate verb ending.
Tener is called a stem-changing verb. That means that when you conjugate tener, you can't just retain the stem, ten, and add the appropriate ending. With stem-changing verbs such as tener, the letters in the stem of the verb change when you conjugate it.
Hey, irregular verbs can be a little freaky, so you should just figure on memorizing which verbs are irregular and what each of their forms are.
Here's the conjugation of tener, which as we said means to have. As we go through it, pay attention to how the stem of the verb changes.
Yo tengo. Tú tienes. Usted, él o ella tiene. Nosotros o nosotras tenemos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas tienen. Notice there's a sneaky G in the yo form, and an I makes its way into all the forms except the nosotros form. These oddities make tener an irregular verb.
You just have to memorize the forms of irregular verbs. Turkeys.
Now let's talk a little about usage. Spanish speakers use the verb tener, to have, in different ways than we use to have in English. For example, in Spanish, tener is used to express age. This is different from the English convention of using to be to express age. In English, we say, I am 20 years old. The Spanish way of expressing age translates loosely to, I have 20 years.
Tengo 20 años. Here's how to ask someone's age in Spanish. ¿Cuántos años tienes? It literally means, how many years do you have? Oh, and by the way, when you say or write the word año, make sure to use the ñ with the tilde over it.
Cuantos means how many. Años means years, and as you know, tienes is the second person singular form of tener, the verb to have. Remember to use 2 question marks when you write a question, one upside down at the beginning and one right side up at the end.
¿Cuántos años tienes?
Tengo 86 años.
Eres joven. Tengo 105 años, pero soy fuerte.
Spanish speakers also use tener to describe a certain physical state, such as hunger or thirst. Again, in English, we use the verb to be in these situations. We say, I am hungry. In Spanish, say,
Tengo hambre,
which translates to I have hunger. It sounds funny, but just get used to it. Translate it as I am hungry, because really it means the same thing.
I am thirsty in Spanish is tengo sed. Yeah, I know. It means I have thirst. But, that's a convention in Spanish, you know that?
Of course, if you are referring to someone other than yourself, you just use the correct form of tener.
For example, if you want to say, the soccer players are thirsty, say, los jugadores de fútbol tienen sed.
Here are some other common uses of the verb tener.
Él tiene frío.
Oh,
wow. Tengo dolor de cabeza.
That one literally translates to, I have pain from head.
Usted tiene mucho estrés.
Ellos tienen rosas del jardín.
Okay, one more time. Here's the conjugation of tener.
Yo tengo. Tú tienes. Usted, él o ella tiene. Nosotros o nosotras tenemos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas tienen.
Now let's go over another irregular stem-changing verb. The verb querer means to want. So, as you can imagine, the verb is used a lot. The conjugation of querer is pretty similar to the conjugation of tener, but not exactly the same, so pay close attention. Again, querer means to want.
Yo quiero. Tú quieres. Usted, él o ella quiere. Nosotros o nosotras queremos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas quieren.
Notice that when you conjugate querer, the stem changes from Q-U-E-R to Q-U-I-E-R. Its conjugation is similar to tener, but the first-person singular form of tener is tengo, with a G. The first-person singular form of querer is quiero, no G. Let's practice the verb querer in a few sentences.
¿Quieres un taco? No, quiero 3 tacos.
One more time. Here's the conjugation of querer.
Yo quiero. Tú quieres. Usted, él o ella quiere. Nosotros o nosotras queremos. Ustedes, ellos o ellas quieren.
Part 4. A little more grammar and some easy stuff.
Section A. Just say no.
Negative statements and sentences are constructed differently in Spanish than they are in English. For one thing, sometimes you get to use a double negative. And in Spanish, it's grammatically correct. All right.
Here's the vocabulary we'll use in this section.
Pescado means fish.
And aquí means here. Right here.
That is all for now. You are dismissed.
We're not going to start with the double negative stuff. We'll save it for a minute. Let's start with this simple rule. In Spanish, the negation words, such as no or never, go right before the verb. Here's what we mean.
By the way, in Spanish, the word no can mean either no or not.
No quiero pescado.
In the sentence, no quiero pescado, notice that the first word of the sentence is no. No is the negation word. It lets you know that the speaker is negating the action of the verb, which immediately follows the negation word. The verb quiero implies the subject yo, so we don't need to write yo. Quiero implies yo because it has the o verb ending, and only yo, the first person singular verb form, uses o.
The word tampoco means neither. Here's where we get into the double negative stuff. Not only are double negatives like not neither and not never allowed in Spanish, they're positively necessary. Here's an example.
Él no quiere pescado tampoco.
In this sentence, él no quiere pescado tampoco, we start with the subject pronoun él, because the verb form quiere can be used with any third person singular subject or with the formal pronoun usted. So we specify the subject. Next comes the negation word no, right before the verb quiere. Pescado is the direct object which follows the verb. Dig around in your brain and remember what a direct object is. In this case, it's the thing the subject doesn't want, the fish. Next comes our second negation word, tampoco.
As we said, tampoco means neither. So if we were to translate our sentence literally, it would say, he does not want fish neither. That sentence is way wrong in English, but it's just ducky in Spanish. When you use a negation word like tampoco or neither, you still have to put the negation word no before the verb.
Here are a couple more examples of negation words that work like tampoco. Nadie means nobody. Nada means nothing, or not at all. And nunca means never.
No hay nadie aquí.
Oh, okay. Do you have a cup of sugar I could borrow?
No. No tenemos nada.
Okay. Oh, sorry to bother you.
Escucho el tren.
In the sentence, no hay nadie aquí, no and nadie are both negation words, so the sentence literally translates to, there's not nobody here. Just get used to the construction and translate it as, there's nobody here. It works the same way in the sentence, no tenemos nada. The word no and nada are both negative. The sentence translates literally to, we don't have nothing. But remember, in Spanish, it has to be that way. Translate this sentence as, we don't have anything.
Well, there just ain't nothing you people don't know.
Section B, possessive adjectives.
Here's the new vocabulary we're going to learn in this section.
Pulpo means octopus.
Ofensivo is the Spanish word that means offensive.
Spanish speakers call me a roca.
Padre means father.
And padres means parents.
Libro means book.
A motocicleta is a motorcycle.
And extraño means strange.
Now on with the possessive adjectives. We just learned the verb tener, which means to have. When you say you have something, you are expressing possession. There are other ways to express possession in both Spanish and English. Possessive adjectives.
I am a possessive adjective, and this is my stuff. You may not use it, so do not ask.
In English, we use words like yours, my, his, theirs, and ours to show possession. These words are adjectives because they tell you something about the upcoming noun. They tell you to whom it belongs.
The English possessive adjectives are my, your, his, her, and their. In Spanish, they are mi, tu, su, and nuestro or nuestra. Notice that the possessive adjective tu does not have an accent over the u like the pronoun tu does. This is a case where the accent indicates a particular meaning rather than a particular pronunciation.
Mi means my. Tu is the informal version of your. Su is the formal version of your, and su can also mean his, hers, or theirs. The only possessive adjective we'll go over that has gender is nuestro, and its feminine form nuestra, which means our.
Spanish possessive adjectives work very much like their English counterparts. For instance, mi is used just like my in English. To say my dog, you'd say mi perro. Notice that unlike most Spanish adjectives, these possessive adjectives go before the noun they modify.
Most adjectives follow the noun as in the phrase el pulpo ofensivo, which means the offensive octopus. If you added a possessive adjective to the phrase, you'd say mi pulpo ofensivo.
So, possessive adjectives go before the noun they modify, and that makes them a little different from most adjectives, but they're not totally different, mind you. You remember how to handle adjectives.
Yeah, cook them thoroughly so you don't get salmonella, huh?
No, I think that's what you do with poultry.
Spanish adjectives have to match in number and often in gender with the noun they modify. This holds true for possessive adjectives as well.
For example, in English we can say my car, or we can say my cars. The same possessive adjective my works with either a singular or a plural noun.
In Spanish, the possessive adjective has to match the noun it modifies. If you have one car, you say mi. Mi is a possessive adjective and carro means car. If you have two cars, the possessive adjective has to become plural as well to match the noun it modifies. You'd say mis carros. It's really very easy. You just have to remember to add an S to the end of both the possessive adjective and the noun. They have to match. It's like coordinating your wardrobe. Here are some examples.
Mi roca? Mis rocas. Tu padre. Tus padres.
The possessive adjective su and its plural form sus go with the formal pronoun usted. If you're talking to your professor and you're referring to her book, you would use the possessive adjective su.
Su libro.
Sus libros.
Su and sus also go with ustedes, the plural you, as well as with el, ella, ellos, and ellas. So su can mean your, his, hers, or theirs.
So really, su libro can mean his book, her book, their book, or it can mean your book if you're using usted, the formal version of you. Since su has so many meanings, make sure your audience knows who you're talking about.
Who are you talking about?
Make yourself clear.
Why are you so vague?
Let's get him!
The thing to remember about possessive adjectives is that, in number, they have to match the thing which is possessed, not the possessor.
The possessive adjectives refer to the possessor, letting you know who the possessor is. But the gender and number of the possessive adjective itself is dependent upon the gender and number of the thing which is possessed, not on the possessor.
Like in Spanish, if you say his motorcycle, the possessive adjective his modifies the noun motorcycle. In Spanish, his motorcycle would be su motocicleta. Mi motocicleta.
So if you're talking about his socks, plural, rather than a single sock, you have to say sus calcetines. The possessive adjective matches the noun it modifies. In this case, the plural noun socks is being modified, so the possessive adjective also must be plural. Just add s.
The adjectives for our are nuestro, the singular masculine form, nuestra, the singular feminine form, nuestros, the plural masculine form, and nuestras, the plural feminine form.
Nuestra hija es muy extraña.
Notice that in the example, nuestra hija es muy extraña. The possessive adjective nuestra is singular and feminine, to match the singular feminine noun hija that it's modifying. You should also notice that the adjective extraña, which means strange, is also in its singular feminine form, to match the noun hija.
Nuestros hijos son extraños también.
Sí.
In this example, we use the masculine plural form nuestros to match the masculine plural noun hijos. Again, notice that the adjective extraños is in its masculine plural form in the sentence to match hijos.
Let's review what we just learned. In Spanish, possessive adjectives have to match the noun they modify. If the noun is singular, then the possessive adjective must be singular. If the noun is plural, then the possessive adjective must be plural. The possessive adjective, which means my, is mi, and its plural form is mis. Tu is the possessive adjective that means your, and tus is its plural form. Su is the adjective that goes with usted, so it's the formal your, and the plural form is sus. Su can also mean his or hers,